Good morning, everybody. You are watching To The Point here on GB News with Patrick Christie's and Mercy Muroki. We've got a show full, as ever, of all the biggest stories of the day, the biggest discussion topics, and all of those things to get you going.
Yes, so here's what's on the menu. The French president has confirmed that he will delay retaliating against the UK as a post-Brexit.
Headlines from world leaders dozing off to big funding pledges to accusations of hypocrisy. We will bring you the latest, which will even include, get this, a Squid Game themed protest.
Yes, we have all of that coming up and much more across the programme, and you can get in touch with your views as usual on gbviews at gbnews.uk. But first, Patrick gives his views on whether Britain is a racist country.
News about the Channel has been dominated in recent weeks by whether or not pound shop Napoleon Emmanuel Macron will essentially start a cod war with the UK. Le Grand Surrender took place last night. Well, more like Le Grand Delay, because Macron has just said negotiations will be ongoing and he's imposed another deadline of Thursday. Isn't it interesting that, given that we've been told that literally everyone at COP26 is the most important moment for humanity and that we're 1 minute to midnight before we're all burning and then freezing and then drowning to death, I find it amazing that Emmanuel Macron and Boris Johnson feel as though that they have the time in the next couple of weeks to rewrite and renegotiate our Brexit deal to appease a couple of hundred French fishermen. But as always, there's something else going on in the Channel. I'm sick and tired of being told that Britain is a racist country. Priti Patel is under massive pressure to justify her claim that 70% of those coming across the Channel in small dinghies are economic migrants and not genuine asylum seekers. I can't help but wonder whether or not things should be the other way round. Shouldn't it be up to those people coming over here to prove that they are genuine asylum seekers and not economic migrants, not us having to prove that they aren't? Priti Patel's claim seems to centre around the demographics of those arriving on our shores. A Home Office source revealed that of the 8,500 people arriving by small boat in 2020, 87% were men and 74% were men aged between 18 and 39. So women and children seem a lot less likely to flee war, apparently. Now, Dr. Peter Walsh, who's a researcher at the Migration Observatory at the University of Oxford, said that the Home Office reports that 59% of claims filed between 2017 and 2019 inclusive were ultimately successful. That's a pretty high number, isn't it? And according to Migration Watch, we haven't actually sent back a single Channel migrant who's landed on our shores so far this year. Figures out today show that crossings in October this year were 6 times higher than they were in October last year. That's 2,669 last month compared to 475 in the same month in 2020. So let's break this down. We're going to have a record year of arrivals and potentially a full year of none of those arrivals being returned to even just another safe country, let alone a war zone. Right then, so can we all just stop thinking for a single second that we're a racist country, or that we're not welcoming, or that our Home Secretary hates asylum seekers, or that this government doesn't like foreign people, or even that it doesn't like illegal immigrants, which by definition a lot of these people are. And then let's stop the idea that our population is, of course, racist. If I was a homeless military veteran, I'd be pitching a tent outside one of these many migrant hotels and begging to know why we can find shelter for those people, but not our armed forces. If I was a single mum living in squalid social housing, unable to get a council to come round and repair it, I'd stand outside one of those hotels with my child and demand, again, to know why we have good accommodation for these people and not her. If I was someone who'd lost their job as a result of this government's response to the pandemic and was evicted by their landlord, I'd do the same thing again. In this country now, there are hundreds of thousands of these people, and yet we're not seeing that kind of response, are we? Because we're not a racist country. But we are decent, we are principled, and I think it's fair to suggest that we can only take so much. I think this government, but more so really those calling for essentially an open-door approach to asylum claims and illegal immigration, should tread very carefully now. How long is it before the population stands up and says, actually, we want to be looked after as well? Yes, look, I just think I'm a bit sick and tired, frankly, of being told that we're not welcoming to these people. I can understand that Priti Patel sometimes talks tough, but by definition, we know that Priti Patel doesn't always tend to act that tough. And so if we're not sending any of these people back, that does mean that we're keeping them all for now, at least. And therefore, the idea as well that there aren't, riots on the streets from people who have got poor social housing or, are in a dire situation themselves, veterans, of course. I mean, that just proves, doesn't it, that we are actually a welcoming country.
I think, by and large, we are a welcoming country. I just don't, for me, saying Britain is not a racist country, it's as lazy as an argument for me as saying Britain is a racist country. It's nothingness. So we can argue back and forth with people who think otherwise. I mean, what does it mean for a country to be racist? What I do think is that the overwhelming majority of people in this country don't judge people based on whether they're an immigrant. They don't judge people based on the colour of their skin. But that's not to negate the fact that there are still considerable pockets of racism, and we are seeing a rise in the far right. That's across the board in Europe as well. So that's why I think sort of arguing over Britain is or isn't racist doesn't really capture the complexity of the issue. But, on the other hand, the reason Priti Patel, I think, can't do what she wants to do is that what she wants to do and how the government wants to crack down and beat up on immigration, firstly, so they'd run into loads of, international and civil and human rights issues. To begin with, it'll be difficult to get through Parliament, probably. And so it's all the complexities around that issue. Ultimately, I do feel the government are stuck between a rock and a hard place because they can't if immigrants are coming to this country, what they're going to do, sort of let them loose on the streets and not do anything at all. They have to sort of house them somewhere. I mean, they can't just not do that. So I do think it's a really difficult issue. The government's stuck between a rock and a hard place. But ultimately, yes, of course, we want them to crack down on illegal immigration. Yeah, well, look, let us know what you think. Of course, GBviews at gbnews.uk, and lots of you have been. I'd vote Patrick for PM. There we go. What a terrifying thought that is, Leslie. But there we go. A lot of you seem to think essentially that I'm right, I suppose. So where are all these immigrant hotels? Well, there's loads of them, actually. There's loads of them in Kent. There's loads of them dotted across the country. And in fact, this government has done deals with hotel chains to a large extent, not for every single one of their hotels, of course, but for lots of them to be used. And they are all over the country, actually. Joan's been in touch. This country is far too soft, and RPM doesn't have a backbone. It's a very, very difficult one. Someone here, Johnny, has said, I think charity starts at home. And I think that's kind of one of the reasons where I'm at the moment. If people are accusing our Home Secretary, which is the implication, really, isn't it, that she's racist because she essentially doesn't particularly like foreign people, and she thinks 70% of these people are economic migrants, not genuine asylum seekers. A lot of the noise coming from the other side on that is, well, you must have racist views. And I think a lot of the noise from people who say, well, actually, if you don't want an open door migration policy or whatever, or you want to maybe send a few people back if they can't prove they're asylum seekers, you must have racist undertones. Well, I don't think there's anything racist, particularly, in my opinion anyway, about wanting people who are living in dire social housing at the moment to be given a better deal, to house a homeless veteran. If we had a referendum on this today, would you rather that your tax money went to housing a homeless veteran or housing someone who's just landed on the from the channel? I think it's a false dichotomy to make. And that's where the problem is, because as soon as you set up... We've got a finite amount of housing, haven't we? Well, that's true, but as soon as you set up the discourse, it's either immigrants or it's either people from this country. That's not what I'm doing. The kinds of sentiments that people who do have ill wishes against immigrants, who it's not the vast majority of people in this country whatsoever. I've not experienced that kind of thing at all at any time I've been in this country. But that does add fuel to the fire sometimes to people when you set up the argument like that. It's immigrants or it's people from this country. That's not what I'm doing. Would you rather house an immigrant or would you rather house some people? Would you rather, if that's the position that we're put in, if there's a finite amount of housing and a finite amount of resources, and we're getting to a level now where we have got increased levels of homelessness, etc., 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 that's a question I think we have to ask ourselves. It's a shame that it can't be absolutely everyone, but we do also have to accept the reality, in my opinion. But well, hey, let us know your views. GBviews at gbnews.uk. But coming up, more on France. They'll be delaying retaliatory measures against the UK while talks over post-Brexit fishing rights continue. Is this a victory for Boris, or do we still have a way to go? We'll be talking about that after the break.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News, for To The Point.
Good morning, everybody. Now, France has said it will delay retaliatory measures against the UK while talks over post-Brexit fishing rights continue. France had threatened to stop Britain from boats from catching a fish off its ports from midnight tonight, actually, in a row over the licensing of French fishing boats. The UK said it welcomed the move and would continue intensive discussion, and a government spokesperson added that this would include considering any new evidence to support the remaining French licence applications.
Well, let's talk now to Sam Ashworth-Hayes, Director of Studies, the Henry Jackson Society, a foreign policy and national security think tank. Thank you very much. Look, some people are calling it Le Grand Surrender. It's more like Le Grand Delay, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly right. France was obviously threatening to choke British exports to a degree and to sort of cut off some electricity to the Channel Islands. So they're having this delay for the talks today, which I think is sort of being brokered by the EU with Britain, France and the Channel Islands in attendance.
OK, all right. So what's the next step? As Macron said, he's given us until Thursday, has he? I mean, I don't understand how they can do this at COP26. They're supposed to be saving the planet, aren't they? They can't rewrite our Brexit deal.
Well, this is one of the interesting things that's coming out here. They're trying to get through quite a complicated negotiation on sort of the technical nature of what proof is required for French fishing boats which want access to British waters, while also trying to negotiate a sort of a new climate deal. So there's a really limited amount of diplomatic bandwidth that both countries have, and at the same time as well, of course, we have these ongoing talks in Northern Ireland. So they're really sort of ramping up the amount required of both diplomatic services at a point when there's not much spare capacity in the system, which may also be why we're seeing these delays.
And from your analysis, I mean, do you think this is all just politicking? Because the two sides differ quite considerably as to what they think has happened. Britain said it's issued 98%, I think, of licenses to French boats. France, I think, has said half haven't been issued. I mean, is it just a bureaucratic mess? Is it politicking? What do you think?
I would go, well, I mean, none of this is really new. We've had fishing rounds with the EU in 1993, in 2012, in 2018. We had them this year. We had them when we joined the EU and they rushed to fisheries policy. It's kind of interesting because this is quite a marginal economic activity, but obviously one that's very politically important. And Macron is obviously eyeing election next year. Boris Johnson doesn't want to be seen backing down post-Brexit. And then you have the EU kind of trapped in the middle, being very frustrated with the whole thing, because the French government is demanding that the EU demonstrate that the cost of leaving are shown to be high, and it also, while it's trying to renegotiate the Northern Irish Protocol in a way that makes sure it stays in place and keeps working. So I think this is entirely driven by domestic political concerns, and there probably is a way we can muddle through on this and find a compromise solution, but everyone kind of has to look tough, and the bigger the steps they take right now to sort of set themselves up as not going to be willing to back down, the trickier it is to do that in a way that doesn't involve people losing face.
My understanding is that this entire debate almost centres around roughly between about 50 and 150 French fishermen. And so it's the idea that realistically you could create an international incident, close ports, have economic impact on that, this, that and the other, for 150 max, I think, French fishermen. I mean, Emmanuel Macron's going OTT here, isn't he?
I mean, I agree, but I mean, at the same time, I suppose he might turn around and say, well, it's obviously such a trifling number that surely Boris Johnson should back down, which is how misunderstandings of this sort can arise. I do think that it's, in my personal opinion, it would be extremely foolish for this to go, to actually go to the level of implementing some of the measures the French have talked about. And I think we probably will find some sort of compromise where some of these folks get access and some don't. But that's obviously my view. I really hope I'm right, because fundamentally, when we step back from the fishing, when we step back from Brexit, France is our strongest European military ally, and it's one we cooperate with a great deal. And whether this was 5 boats or 500, it would be extremely foolish to threaten that goodwill over something like this.
Well, Sam Ashworth-Hayes, thank you for joining us this morning to give us that analysis. Director of Studies from Henry Jackson, the Henry Jackson Society, which is a foreign policy and national security think tank.
Yes, well, interesting times, isn't it? Of course, that delay is supposed to be until about Thursday. I suspect it will keep rolling on. My understanding is that Macron's election isn't, I don't think, until April. So, frankly, I suppose he can delay it until then if he really wants to. But GB Views at gbnews.uk. A lot of you have been getting in touch. We've had an email in here. Please don't blame migrants for our veterans being on the streets. The Tories have been in power for 12 years. Absolutely, 100%. I agree with that. I agree. That's no name on that one, actually. Paul, though, has been in touch. I'm sick and tired of being accused of being racist for wanting a more stringent approach to immigration. And I think a lot of people can relate to that, can't they? I think it seems to be a very, for want of a better phrase, black and white approach to the way that you view racism in this country, isn't there? Which is that if you want tighter border controls, you must be some kind of frothing little Englander. Yeah,
and I suppose that's what characterised the whole Brexit debate, well, much of it anyway. This idea that wanting tighter immigration wasn't a sovereignty issue, or wanting to stop the free movement of people wasn't a sovereignty issue, but was actually people expressing their xenophobia, which of course was a very small minority of people. Yeah. For a lot of people, it was actually just getting control of our borders, and it was about sovereignty.
Yes, indeed. Right, we'll keep those views coming throughout the show. We've got loads for you. We're going to be talking about COP26, of course. Got a nice little whiz-through for you of people falling asleep, people tripping over, people getting angry outside. What's not to love? GB Views at gbnews.uk. We'll have plenty of those top stories for you after the break.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday right here on GB News. To the point. Good morning, everyone. You're watching To The Point here on GB News with me, Patrick Christys, and Mercy Maroki. We're here all the way through until midday. And today, I really do mean it when I say we've got loads of great stories for you on all of the biggest issues.
Yes, make sure you get in touch with us with your views. As usual, GB Views at gbnews.uk, and we'll get to those throughout the show. But first, it's time to give you the latest news with Rosie.
Good morning, I'm Rosie Wright. This is your news at 10 o'clock. 105 countries, including Brazil, Canada and Russia, are going to sign a deal pledging to end and reverse deforestation by 2030. It will be the first major agreement at the COP26 summit. When combined, the full list of signatories will represent 85% of the world's forests. Boris Johnson described the pledge as a chance to end humanity's long history as nature's conqueror and instead become its custodian.
Let's channel funds towards securing the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities and shift trillions towards supporting sustainable jobs, so that protecting our forests is not only the right course of action to tackle climate change, but the right course for a more prosperous future for us all.
The Queen has called for world leaders attending COP26 to work together to tackle climate change. In a video message that was played during the summit, she warned that the time for words has now moved to the time for action. The Queen also paid tribute to her late husband, the Duke of Edinburgh, for his environmental campaigning, a cause he tried to raise awareness for over 50 years.
In the coming days, the world has the chance to join in the shared objective of creating a safer, stabler future for our people and for the planet on which we depend. None of us underestimates the challenges ahead, but history has shown that when nations come together in common cause, there is always room for hope.
The Environment Secretary, George Eustice, says that a British scallop trawler has now been released after being held by French authorities. Well, it comes after France backed down in a dispute over French vessels fishing in British waters. The French president warned they could block British boats from its ports from today if they fail to issue more licences to French fishermen. Speaking to GB News, the Environment Secretary said any action by France would have been a breach of the Brexit agreement.
Those threats to deliberately create border disruption and prevent UK vessels going into French ports would have been a breach of the agreement we've got with the European Union, and probably would have breached elements of EU law as well. They only have to demonstrate that they've got a track record of working, at least one day a year over a 4-year period of accessing our waters. The vast majority have been able to demonstrate that with the records that they have.
MPs are calling for the rollout of smart motorways to be suspended due to safety concerns. The scheme, which uses the hard shoulder as a permanent traffic lane, has been criticised by the Commons Transport Select Committee. Well, concerns were raised after multiple incidents involving fatalities where broken-down vehicles were hit by other drivers from behind. Yesterday, demonstrators protested against smart motorways by marching to the Houses of Parliament. A new study has found that phone and video consultations with doctors are worse but more convenient than face-to-face appointments. Researchers at the University of Cambridge found that medics and patients feel that with teleconsultations, it's harder to build a trusting relationship. But it is more convenient for both sides. Of course, there are reduced waiting times, no travelling and safety from infection. Some doctors, however, have said that the NHS technology is embarrassingly primitive for delivering those types of consultations. Insulate Britain has begun staging demonstrations outside the southeast of England for the first time today. Around 60 protesters disrupted traffic in London, Birmingham and Manchester this morning. Meanwhile, 9 Insulate Britain demonstrators have now been told they face committal proceedings over the breaking of injunctions granted to national highways. The Australian Prime Minister has defended his handling of the scrapped submarine deal with France after the French president accused him of lying. Last month, Australia cancelled a $68 billion agreement with France, instead joining an alliance with the United States and Britain. That was in exchange for security intelligence and nuclear-powered submarines. Speaking at COP26, Scott Morrison said he could deal with the criticism of himself, but would not accept it of his country.
I'm not going to cop sledging at Australia. I'm not going to cop that on behalf of other Australians. I can deal with whatever people throw at me, but Australia has a proud record when it comes to our defence capability. That's why we'll be building these and we'll be building others, and Australia's service record, I think, needs no elaboration.
You're up to date here on GB News. I'll have the latest headlines for you in half an hour. Now it's back to the point.
Morning, everyone. You are watching To The Point here on GB News with Patrick Christie's and Mercy Muroki. And it's going to be a big couple of hours for you now, all those big discussion points, all those big topics. So let's get talking.
Yes, COP26 is well underway in Glasgow, and the summit continues to draw headlines, from world leaders dozing off to funding pledges to accusations of hypocrisy. We'll bring you the latest, which will even include a Squid Game themed protest. We'll tell you all about that very shortly.
The mind boggles, doesn't it? We'll be going head to head on whether or not e-cigarettes should be prescribed on the National Health Service following plans unveiled by the Secretary of State for Health and Social Care. Do you think the taxpayer should be funding vapes? Let us know.
Yes, and the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, has been forced to apologise after comparing politicians who don't act on climate change to Nazis. We'll show you what he had to say and get your thoughts on that.
Well, all of that coming up and much more as well across the programme. But you can get in touch, GBViews at gbnews.uk. In a moment, Mercy's going to give her views on positive discrimination. But first, we're actually heading live now to the Old Bailey to hear more about two Met police officers charged with misconduct after the murders of sisters Bibba Henry and Nicole Smallman. Mark, I believe, joins us now. There he is. What are the latest developments, please, Mark?
The two police officers have pleaded guilty to misconduct in public office. This is a horrific betrayal of trust. Two officers who were charged with guarding the murder scene, the scene where two sisters, Bibba Henry and Nicole Smallman, were stabbed to death by Daniel Hussein on the 7th of June last year. Those officers should have been guarding the perimeter of that crime scene. Instead, they entered the crime scene, we're told, alerted members of the public and other colleagues that they were there via the WhatsApp messaging system, and then took photographs of the crime scene, including photographs of the bodies of these two sisters. In one photograph, we heard in court, the officers, one or both of the officers, we weren't quite sure on that point, superimposed their own head on top of images of the bodies of these sisters. An utterly shocking case on top of what was an appalling crime anyway. You'll remember last week that Daniel Hussein, this 19-year-old, was sentenced to 35 years in jail for murdering sisters Bibba Henry and Nicole Smallman. They had been out celebrating Bibba's 47th birthday, also celebrating the partial lifting of lockdown in Friant Country Park in northwest London. It was late at night. They'd been there with friends. Friends drifted off. The two sisters were still there when Daniel Hussein, who was out looking for victims because of a bizarre pact he had made with the devil to murder 6 victims, innocent women, every 6 months in order, he thought, to have better luck with women and better luck winning the lottery. He had killed those two sisters. Police were convinced he would have gone on to murder other people had he not been stopped. So a terrible enough case, of course, for the family of these two sisters to come to terms with. And we heard from Mina Smallman, former archdeacon in the Church of England, the mother of the two sisters, who spoke of the real anguish and heartache that she had and her wish that Daniel Hussein spends the rest of his life behind bars. Now, she didn't speak really at any length about what these two officers have now pleaded guilty to, but there is no doubt she will have something to say. We don't know whether that will be today or whether she will wait for the sentencing of these two officers, which we're told will take place, we believe, sometime in December.
Thank you very much, Mark. Mark White there outside the Old Bailey. Very, very, very disturbing case. Of course, our Home Affairs and Security editor. Anyway, well, look, ladies and gentlemen, it is now time, finally, for Mercy's deathless prose. So we're going to go to Mercy's monologue right now.
An American survey has found that a third of white American students admit lying about their race on university applications to increase their prospects. Half of the students surveyed said that they lied so they could get access to financial support that universities only had on offer for racial minorities, and 8 in 10 said that they did it to increase their chances of actually getting in. 3/4 of those who lied actually did get in, and essentially this means that there is a small silent army of white American students who've duped universities out of resources because they've figured out that in this game of life, race trumps all, and can you blame them? The troubling thing is, I find this survey completely unsurprising. Indeed, last year, the US State Department for Justice found that Yale University, which is one of the very best on the planet, actually discriminated against white and Asian applicants, with students from those ethnicities finding it several times harder than black applicants with the same grades to actually get into the university. This latest survey is just yet another indication of the insidious consequences of slowly putting identity characteristics over merit. When we're structuring how we determine worth and how we allocate reward around immutable characteristics like race or nebulous characteristics such as gender identity, of course people are going to lie to get ahead. It's completely unethical, but it's completely rational, is it not? This is the bed we have allowed the identity politics lobby to make, and sadly, the rest of us may have to lie in it. The US Supreme Court Chief Justice John Roberts puts it very succinctly. He says this: the way to stop discrimination on the basis of race is to stop discriminating on the basis of race. 2 wrongs don't make a right. Let's not structure our judgments around race, but if that's what we do choose to do as a society, then we can't complain about the consequences.
Yeah, I've done that. I've lied on forms.
That doesn't surprise me whatsoever. But about your qualifications, didn't you cheat on your GCSE French? Wasn't it?
I cheated on loads of GCSEs, but I've lied on form when there's been applications with it because, like you said,
said that you're transgender or something.
Well, yeah, I challenged them to disprove it. No, but I've put things. So, yeah, I've put at times like because I'm half Irish, half Greek Cypriot, so there's often like a white other, or sometimes you have these really long characteristics, don't you? Or sometimes I just put mixed, right? Because I did figure out, like you said there, that actually I honestly think that on most job applications now you're less likely to get it if you just put.
Yeah, I mean, but the thing is, okay, so that monitoring, the equality data that the jobs collect. It's legally supposed to be sort of confidential, and it's not supposed to factor into actually you getting the job. That is in theory. With universities, it's different because they overtly say, we have especially in America where positive discrimination is a legal practice, they say, look, we have a certain number of places for students from ethnic minority backgrounds, for example, and actually half of them who were lying were saying they were Native American because it's hard to lie to say you're black when you're a white person, but a lot of them could get away with having Native American roots, for example. But this is the inevitable result of the society we've created, or some of us have created, which is that we are now in a position where certain characteristics, such as race, are often held in higher regard than things such as merit, and that's why you get a university, one of the top universities in the whole world, being found by the US State Department for Justice to be actively discriminating against white students and Asian students for the benefit of black students. Now, one of the reasons I'm against this is because it surely delegitimizes the merit of the students who get in, because I do genuinely feel that if I get anything, if I was to ever get anything purely because I was an ethnic minority, not purely because, but if that was taken as a reason where I was given the job over somebody else, then people would forever be doubting whether I'm truly worthy of being in that job. And why would you want to live your life with people sort of doubting whether you do deserve to actually be in the job or be at the university? I think it's incredibly dangerous.
And also, I think as well, it can genuinely stoke racist divisions as well. If you end up with a lot of white people out there thinking that someone who's an ethnic minority has only got that job because they're an ethnic minority, then that doesn't do any favours for race relations, does it, to be honest with you?
And it actually just reinforces tropes.
Yeah.
You're not good enough. You're not as good as I am, so you have to get a special scheme to get, which is literally what we're trying to fight against, people thinking that ethnic minorities are inferior. So it's ridiculous and it's counterproductive.
Absolutely, yes, there we go. Well, look, GB Views at gbnews.uk, and as ever, keep them coming, and we'll go to those very, very shortly. But turning now to COP26, the Queen addressed the delegates of the climate summit taking place in Glasgow, urging them to rise above the politics of the moment and act for our children to create a safer, stabler future.
Yes, and on a personal note as well, she added that she took great pride in how her dear late husband, Prince Philip, promoted environmental issues, and how proud she was as well of her son, Prince Charles, and grandson, Prince William, for continuing to do so themselves. The message was pre-recorded at Windsor Castle last week as the 95-year-old monarch continues to rest on a doctor's advice. Here's what she had to say.
As the impact of the environment on human progress was a subject close to the heart of my dear late husband, Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh. I, for one, hope that this conference will be one of those rare occasions where everyone will have the chance to rise above the politics of the moment and achieve true statesmanship.
Yes, well, meanwhile, Prince Charles told world leaders that they must partner with businesses in a vast military-style campaign if they stand any hope of achieving climate change action. He likened the challenge they face to preparing for a war.
The COVID-19 pandemic has shown us just how devastating a global cross-border threat can be. Climate change and biodiversity loss are no different. In fact, they pose an even greater existential threat, to the extent that we have to put ourselves on what might be called a warlike footing.
And environmentalist David Attenborough is also at COP26. He told delegates that the time for action is now.
In my lifetime, I've witnessed a terrible decline. In yours, you could and should witness a wonderful recovery. That desperate hope, ladies and gentlemen, delegates, excellency, is why the world is looking to you and why you are here.
Gosh, I do think if I sat there, if David Attenborough did the entire COP26 thing, I think by the end of it, I'd probably insulate my own home, buy a heat pump. I'd be down there buying an electric car.
I mean, how can you not?
Just go and hug a tree, you know.
I think he's actually one of the few people I'm willing to take very, very seriously in this entire COP26 conference, because he's dedicated his life to this thing.
Yeah.
I trust that he knows what he's talking about from a scientific perspective. But when I hear Boris Johnson or all the other politicians who are blatant hypocrites when it comes to the environment, I'm less inclined to take them very seriously.
I really hope David Attenborough didn't take a private jet there, because that would ruin the whole thing. But anyway, meanwhile, speaking of a rally somewhere near the summit, Greta Thunberg told climate activists that politicians are pretending to take people's futures seriously and that COP26 will not create change.
Change is not going to come from inside there. That is not leadership. This is leadership. Yeah! This is what leadership looks like. We say no more blah, blah, blah. No more exploitation of people and nature and the planet. We're sick and tired of it, and we're going to make the change, whether they like it or not.
I think if she really meant no more blah, 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 then she'd just hand the microphone over. But anyway, something else there.
Yes, and amid all of the headlines of day one, it felt right to offer a reminder exemplified by the closing eyes of sleepy Joe Biden, as he's called.
There he goes. Not
everybody will be watching what happens in Glasgow as attentively as they are told to. And it must be said that at some point Boris Johnson also had a for balance. Boris
it's just ridiculous, isn't it?
But also, can you blame him? I mean, I'm not even mad at him, because it is dull.
then an aide comes over. I don't know how long this particular video goes on for, but an aide pops in at one point, and then just like, and it's I think it's hard to tell whether or not this clip has ended because Joe Biden's just still sitting there, isn't it? Yeah, that clip had ended. But anyway, we're going to go over to GB News' political correspondent Tom Harwood, who's in Glasgow for us now. Tom, what's going on for us?
I am in Glasgow and I'm just about managing to stay awake as well. So 2 ticks there, unlike, of course, those 2 world leaders who we're seeing. But I mean, I can empathise with Joe Biden and Boris Johnson right now. I mean, whilst you can get the big headlines of those agreements, what's behind those agreements is arduous negotiation and legal text. That is not particularly fun to drill through and listen to. But that's what this conference is all about. Whilst it may look like there are some grand displays, whilst it might look like there's some action going on, some exhibits, even some enormous rotating globes, actually the real meat of this conference is what goes on in the other end of this building, the porter cabins filled with civil servants and delegates from various negotiating teams of countries, because ultimately this conference is all about reaching agreements. And at the end of what's called the blue zone, where we are now in COP26, there are all of these negotiating rooms, there are all of these very white, very clinical, very boxy rooms for different countries. You'll walk down sort of these corridors and it'll say on one door United States, on another door Mexico, on another door Ecuador, and it's sort of representatives of all of these countries holed up together in this sort of makeshift temporary city while they run between each other with different plans and different negotiations. Well, one bit of a result came out this morning. Indeed, it was announced late last night. Most of the world has agreed to end deforestation within the next 9 years, which is a pretty incredible feat. It's something that a lot of people will be raising an eyebrow about, considering the amount of deforestation that we've seen. But even countries like China, like Russia, and like Brazil have signed up to this new international goal. There have been international goals on deforestation in the past, but never uniting such a broad coalition of hostile foreign powers. Well, it seems that this might actually be a bit of a turning point, but actually, if we look at what's happened in the Northern Hemisphere with regard to forestry in the last decade, it started to grow again. Actually, the last time that forestry shrunk in the non-tropical part of the world was 30 years ago. So we have seen that progress has been made, and I think that sometimes at these conferences, sometimes we sort of want to look after all the doom and gloom and talk about what's going wrong in the world, whereas actually there has been a lot that's been going right, particularly in the last 30 or so years. Indeed, the amount of deforestation in the tropical parts of the world, the Amazon rainforest elsewhere, adding that all up together, the amount of deforestation now is lower than at any time since the 1980s. So it is trending in the right direction. Is that goal by 2030 achievable? It just might be.
Thank you very much, Tom, there, whizzing us through the very latest from COP26. A fantastic development, that, really, the deforestation stuff. Is there a case, I wonder, of believe it when you see it, or what?
I mean, it doesn't seem hard to achieve, because it's not like we need to invent a new technology to stop cutting down trees. I think it seems like a simple and achievable objective, really.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to see now. And hey, it's almost like we planned it, ladies and gentlemen. We're joined now by Wera Hobhouse. He's a Liberal Democrat MP for Bath and Vice Chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Climate Change. We got there in the end, Wera. Now, look, is this going to happen? What's the process here? Some people might be going, well, does this mean we have to stop using wood? How are we going to get wood now? We just cut a tree down again. Talk me through it.
Well, first of all, I think we should agree that not everything is doom and gloom. People are now finally all on the road to net zero. And the question is, how quickly do we get there? Because we have a target of 2050 and we need to get to 1.5 degrees Celsius. And I think this is a big political difference. How fast are we going along this road? Deforestation is one of the building blocks in sort of creating global warming or not. capturing the carbon that we produce. So trees are our natural allies in capturing carbon. And if we're cutting down trees, we are sort of blocking our ability to take these damaging gases out of the atmosphere. It's one building block. One of the most important things in all of this is, when are we going to stop extracting fossil fuels and using them? And there we are still not making any progress. The G20 have not agreed on stopping the use of coal. These are the really big questions that need to be resolved. And unfortunately, we are not anywhere near it. So deforestation, good point. Good that there is an agreement, but it's only a small part of the whole picture.
And you've been quite critical of the government. You wrote an article a few days ago which you said the government's limping towards this COP26 opportunity, and it's damaging our country's credibility on the world stage. So presumably you think actually the government should be going harder and faster in pursuing the green agenda. At what cost will that come to ordinary people of the country?
We shouldn't look at it at cost to ordinary people in the country. It's about government setting the right signals for industry and investment of where it actually wants to go. And if I'm going back to stopping the use of fossil fuels, let's take the energy sector, so the way we produce electricity. The government has now set in its net zero strategy a target of 2035 when it will all production of electricity will be carbon neutral, but it doesn't say it will be produced by renewables. So that means we will continue to create electricity by burning fossil fuels, capturing the carbon and putting it back into the seabed. Why don't we actually pursue a strategy where we are saying we are only investing in renewables? That's where we are going, because that's where where we have to end up anyway. We need to stop using fossil fuels, and the sooner the better. And if the government, our own government, isn't setting an end date of the extraction and using of fossil fuels in this country, it cannot provide the leadership, I believe, that it needs to set on the world stage.
What kind of example do you think it's set that both Joe Biden and Boris Johnson fell asleep during COP26?
Well, that never looks good, let's face it. I do believe these guys have had very sleepless nights and had to travel far. Joe Biden is not the youngest of politicians. But I would say I sympathize with them. If you only had 4 hours sleep, you were on a plane, you had to sit through long negotiations, then to occasionally close your eyes might be a human thing to do.
Well, thank you very much. I thought it was fascinating stuff, actually, really. Fingers crossed that we do get actual results out of this COP26 situation, of course. And that was Liberal Democrat MP Wera Hobhouse MP for Bath, and, of course, Vice Chair of the All-Party Parliamentary Group on Climate Change.
Yeah, maybe we are a bit too... You forget, how old is Joe Biden? He's very old.
Oh, you're
he has travelled quite a bit.
Yeah.
He's been in Rome, I think it was, and now he's in Glasgow. So maybe we are being a bit too harsh on him, but we'll be bringing you more COP26 information and updates throughout the morning. But coming up, should the NHS provide e-cigarettes for free? Well, we'll be joined by Chris Snowdon from the Institute of Economic Affairs, and he'll be going head-to-head with Hazel Cheeseman, who's the Deputy Chief Executive at Action on Smoking and Health. But first, let's go to the day's weather.
Hello, good morning. A cold start out there for many of us, but a bright start. Plenty of blue skies and sunny spells expected through the rest of the day. There will be further showers in places, low pressure still close by, but as this low slowly moves off the scene, we pull this colder feed from the northwest. That's also containing a number of showers, but mainly to the north and the west of the UK. That's where the showers have continued through the night. Further showers for northern Scotland, Northern Ireland, parts of Western England and West Wales well through the morning and into the afternoon. Elsewhere, some mist patches first thing, they'll lift, and then plenty of sunny spells. 1 or 2 showers will develop elsewhere, but mostly they'll be focused towards the north and the west. Wherever they are, though, they'll be fairly fleeting, pushed through on a gusty breeze, and it will feel a little on the chilly side, I think, this afternoon, with temperatures reaching 9 to 12 Celsius, and then after dark, those temperatures falling quite quickly
And we're looking at light winds across many southern and central and eastern parts of the country, as well as clear skies, allowing those temperatures to fall. A touch of frost in places as we start off Wednesday, with temperatures in the low single figures or in some shelter spots just below freezing. But those showers will be continuing around Irish Sea coasts into the north of Scotland, Northern Ireland. 1 or 2 expected for North Sea coasts as well. But away from the showers, plenty of clear or sunny spells expected throughout Wednesday. The brisker breeze coming all the way from the north will feel on the cold side, and it will feel particularly chilly if you're exposed to that wind on the North Sea coast. But inland, shelter from the breeze, sunshine. It's looking like a fine, bright day for many, so temperatures of 9 to 11 Celsius won't feel too bad. A similar day to come on Thursday, perhaps fewer showers later as we progress into the afternoon. And then by Friday, many of the showers die away. It turns a bit milder, but it will also turn more unsettled in the far northwest.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of 2 wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday. Call to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday right here on GB News for To The Point.
This is GB News. I'm Rosie Wright. Let's get you up to date. 105 countries are going to sign a deal pledging to end and reverse deforestation by 2030 in the first major agreement at the COP26 climate summit. The countries involved represent 85% of the world's forests. Boris Johnson will describe the pledge as a chance to end humanity's long history as nature's conqueror and instead become its custodian. 2 Metropolitan Police officers have pleaded guilty to misconduct in public office after they shared images of the bodies of 2 murdered women. PC Dennis Jaffa and PC Jamie Lewis took photos of the murdered sisters Bieber Henry and Nicole Smallman on WhatsApp while they were protecting a police cordon. Insulate Britain has begun staging demonstrations outside of the southeast of England for the first time today. Around 60 protesters disrupted traffic in London, Birmingham and Manchester this morning. Meanwhile, 9 Insulate Britain demonstrators have now been told they face committal proceedings over the breaking of injunctions granted to national highways. The Australian Prime Minister has defended his handling of the scrapped submarine deal with France after the French president accused him of lying. Last month, Australia cancelled a $68 billion agreement with France, instead joining an alliance with the United States and Britain. While speaking at COP26, the Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison said he could deal with criticism of himself, but would not accept it of his country. Some MPs are calling for the rollout of smart motorways to be suspended because of safety concerns. The scheme, which uses the hard shoulder as a permanent traffic lane, has been criticised after multiple incidents where broken-down vehicles were hit by other drivers. Yesterday, demonstrators protested against smart motorways by marching to the Houses of Parliament. You are up to date here on GB News. I'll have more on today's main stories for you at the top of the hour. But now, back to Patrick and Mercy.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Now, it's that time of day again. This morning, our head-to-head question is whether or not e-cigarettes should be prescribed on the National Health Service as part of a push to reduce the number of tobacco smokers. Now, the Health Secretary, Sajid Javid, has said that the NHS had the potential to tackle the stark disparities in smoking rates across the country, helping people stop smoking wherever they live and whatever their background.
Yes, currently the NHS advises that vaping can help smokers quit, though it's not available on prescriptions, and vapes typically cost around £20, with replacement cartridges also needing to be bought. Well, on one side of the debate is Christopher Snowdon, Head of Lifestyle at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Christopher thinks e-cigarettes should not be available on prescription. And do we have our second guest? We've got Hazel Cheeseman, who's the Deputy Chief Executive, at Action on Smoking and Health, and is for the policy of e-cigarettes being available on prescription.
Yes, well, we're going to go to you first, obviously, and hopefully you know the drill by now, Hazel. You get 60 seconds uninterrupted, and then we have a wider discussion. So, Hazel, your 60 seconds starts now. Should we be prescribing vapes on the NHS?
Well, as you've already described, smoking is a massive burden to the NHS and to individuals who smoke. Half of all lifetime smokers will die from their disease. And so it's really important that we find as many tools as we can to help people stop smoking. And e-cigarettes on prescription can absolutely play a role. They're a very popular aid to quitting. Many people have successfully used them in the UK to quit already. But there are two really good reasons why having them on prescription is important. One, because we can make them more effective, and two, because we can help more people to use these really useful products. We know that e-cigarettes are about twice as effective currently as medications like nicotine replacement therapy, but having them on prescription means that they come with all the advice and support that smokers need from medical professionals to help them quit successfully. But also the products can be at higher strengths than our consumer regulation allows them to be, which might definitely benefit some more addicted smokers. But also we have, about a third of...
60 seconds, that's your 60 seconds, I'm afraid. So, there you go. So, Christopher Hager. We'll come back to all of that, don't worry. Christopher, I'm going to go to you now, Christopher Snowdon. Do you think that we should be prescribing vapes on the NHS?
No. I mean, I'm a vapor myself, and I don't really want to start people who don't vape. I don't want them to start begrudging people like me because they have to subsidise us. Vaping, it's a recreational product at the end of the day. Yes, of course, it helps lots of people like myself get off smoking, but it's not something like nicotine patches or gum where you're supposed to give up the patches and gum after 3 months or 6 months. Most people, I think, will continue using nicotine through e-cigarettes for many cases the rest of their lives. So should the general public be forced to subsidise people for what is essentially a recreational product, a recreational drug? I would say not. If you can afford to smoke, you can definitely afford to vape. I spend about £1 at most a day vaping. If I was still smoking, it would be £10. So the financial incentives already exist for people to switch over. The only good thing I would say about the idea is it would at least send a good message out. There's a lot of scaremongering about vaping going on in Britain and around the world, and if the UK was prescribing...
That's your minute over.
Time up, Chris.
That's your minute over. Hazel, I just want to throw to you something Chris said, which is that actually e-cigarettes are more of a recreational thing and they don't hold the same sort of position as nicotine patches, which obviously are given to smokers to help them stop smoking.
Obviously, people are using these products in all sorts of different ways. But if we do polling of large number of vapers, and people report using these products as an aid to quitting. They see them as a medication. And Chris's point that people might use them long term, I mean, people use nicotine replacement therapy long term as well, and it is in fact licensed to be used long term. But we're not necessarily saying that the NHS should fund a lifetime of people's vaping, but getting them over the hurdle of quitting smoking in the way that we fund nicotine replacement therapy is a really, really good use of NHS funding when you think about what it costs to treat the illnesses that smoking causes further down the line. So let's not pretend this is about funding people's vaping for their whole lives. This is about funding support for people to give up what is a very difficult thing to stop doing.
OK, all right. Well, Christopher, what do you reckon to that? I mean, I suppose, look, the big argument is we're already wheeling out loads of cash for our NHS now. It's getting more and more money. So, why should we presumably have to funnel some of it into e-cigarettes when people can buy them themselves?
Well, exactly. I mean, we've got half as many hospital beds as the average EU country. We've got about 2/3 as many doctors. We have a winter crisis every single year. I think people quite understandably be saying, look, if we can't do the basics of healthcare, why are we spending money giving something to people that they can very easily and quite cheaply get for free down the corner?
I'll throw that back to Hazel in a second, but I saw you shaking your head when Hazel was speaking on the point about some people see e-cigarettes as medicinal, and I saw you shaking your head. What do you make of that?
Yeah, well, I don't think they do, and they shouldn't do. They're not medicinal products. The medicinal products don't work very well, partly because they are portrayed as medicinal, and smokers don't see themselves as patients or even people who are in need of help particularly. They see themselves as somebody who's got maybe hooked on something, and they're in many cases quite like to give up. But one of the things that's really been powerful about e-cigarettes and made it such a revolution in smoking cessation over the course of the last 10 years is that people see them as something enjoyable and fun. I suspect that whatever e-cigarettes make it through the licensing process, they probably won't be considered to be much fun. They probably won't be very good, actually, because innovation ticks on so quickly, they'll probably overtake anything the NHS can prescribe, and then people will be put off vaping.
And Hazel, what do you make of that and what Patrick said about why people might feel, well, I'm already paying enough taxes, why should I have to fund yet another initiative to stop people smoking, especially people who don't smoke? They'll be funding this essentially.
Yeah, they're two kind of different points. I think Chris is right. People absolutely have used e-cigarettes because they are enjoyable, and that's why many smokers have switched to vaping, and that's been really successful for them. We've got about 1/3 of smokers who have yet to try these products. We've got to find a different way to reach those people. And medicinal products, I genuinely believe that, to agree with Chris again, as he was saying, it puts the message out there that these are safe and effective products. And then on the point around, the cost to the NHS, we pay for the consequences of smoking. We will pay for them further down the line in the cost of heart disease and lung disease and all the cancers which smoking causes, or we can pay a much, much smaller amount of money up front and effectively help people to stop smoking in the same way that we already do with a load of other medications and support.
OK, all right. Well, look, thank you very much, both of you. That was Christopher Snowdon, Head of Lifestyle at the Institute of Economic Affairs, and as well, Hazel Cheeseman, who's Deputy Chief Executive at Action on Smoking and Health, and is for the policy of e-cigarettes being available on prescription. Well, what do you think as well? Of course, you can always get in touch with us, GBviews at gbnews.uk.
I think it's an interesting one, the point about prevention, which is, well, if you sort of fund for somebody to have an e-cigarette now, then actually you're saving money down the line. And that is actually quite a solid argument, isn't it? Because we talk a lot about, we're treating sort of people for being overweight. We spend so much money on treating that and all the things associated with that. And it's like, well, actually, there is a case to then do something much sooner before the problems arise. But I think people like spending money on problems they can see, not future problems that they can't see. Yes, and
we've had lots of people getting in touch. Philip, blowing clouds of smoke has become a fashion statement among school children around Oxford. I presume that's where you live, Philip. We're fantastic. Smoking. I can't believe what I'm hearing. Smokers have a choice. Cigs or vapes, why should the taxpayer pay? It's ridiculous. That's from Mark. Yes. And there's a lot of this going about, to be fair. Smoking is not... Oh, gosh, here we go, aren't you? Smoking smoking is not a huge burden on the NHS. Most of the cost of a packet of fags is tax. So smokers pay far more tax than anyone else. Therefore, smokers are financially funding the NHS.
Yeah, well, we would be the first country in the world to actually prescribe this if the government were to accept it. So clearly not many other countries think it's the right way forward. So maybe that is saying something.
Well,
maybe we're just paving the way, who knows?
Keep those views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now, after the break, from the Queen to Greta Thunberg, environmental heavyweights have descended on Glasgow for the COP26 climate summit. We'll be bringing you all the latest, get this, from a Squid Game-inspired protest as well to aviation in the age of carbon emissions.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point. Yes, now leading figures from the travel industry are gathering at the World Travel Market in London's Excel Centre to discuss the future of the travel industry. Excuse me, sorry, you're going to have to do this now.
Are you okay? This is one of the biggest events in aviation, and as the world continues to emerge from the pandemic's travel hibernation, the future of the industry is being discussed. And in light of COP26, how the industry is going to get much greener is also on the table. Well, we're joined by John Strickland, who's an aviation expert and director of JLS Consulting, which is an air transport consultancy for airports, airlines and investors. Thank you for joining us this morning. Obviously, against the backdrop of COP26, we've been speaking a lot about politicians taking private jets and into COP26 and causing further pollution. How green are airlines at the moment, and how green can we expect them to be if we're to meet the government's climate agenda?
Well, airlines do take the issue of the environment very seriously. If that was not the case in the past, the penny certainly has dropped in the last couple of years. The industry body IATA recently agreed to carbon net zero by 2050. We're seeing the aircraft in the airlines' fleets becoming more efficient. COVID, oddly enough, has been a bit of a catalyst to improvements in efficiency. A lot of older, larger gas-guzzling aircraft have been grounded for good. Airlines have been investing in new aircraft which already burn substantially less fuel and produce much less emissions. And there's an awful lot of research work going on in alternative fuels to actually help the industry to move away from fossil fuels towards electric engines and hydrogen-powered aircraft too. The challenge being those are very much well in the future. Probably not more than, or not less than 20 or 30 years away, particularly for large airliners that do long-haul flights. But what the industry is also saying is they want to move during the current decade to using what are called sustainable aviation fuels, which produce much less emissions than the kerosene that is used today.
I mean, they could be doing a bit more to encourage encourage us to not fly, not use these fossil fuel, etc., couldn't they? By maybe flying a bit less themselves and doing all that stuff, couldn't they?
Well, they've been flying much less, of course, in the last year because of COVID. You know, the industry's been operating at less than half of its previous levels. And as I said, some older aircraft have retired. Many long-haul flights are still not back in operation. The challenge is, of course, there isn't an alternative fuel right now, and the industry is on its knees. Many airlines have failed. Others have had to ask for support from their governments around the world. But, you know, we also need to see those governments playing ball with the industry. This is an industry which is not a nice to have. It's an essential for the human race in the 21st century. We all need to travel for business, for tourism. Here I am at the world travel market where many countries, the biggest source of livelihood for their citizens is tourism, and distances, for example, between some islands around the world are so great, there's no alternative but to fly. So we need to see governments make the same kind of commitment and investment they've done in terms of vaccine development, for example, to deal with this crisis of COVID, to invest as well in these alternative fuels and help aviation to play its part and become a greener industry more quickly than it can if it was left to its own resources, which sadly are too lacking to fully invest in that challenge.
Well, John Strickland, thank you so much for joining us. Sorry it was a bit short joining us again to discuss that. He was an aviation expert and director of JLS Consulting. But now climate activist Greta Thunberg has told young protesters that politicians attending COP26 are only pretending to take our future seriously. Instead, she says meaningful change would come from individuals showing leadership, not politicians.
Yes, the gathering, attended by Thunberg, was one of dozens taking place across the city of Glasgow as the COP26 conference gets underway. Tens of thousands have descended on the city to protest, perform and campaign for effective climate change solutions.
Yes, well, our GBNews Scotland reporter Davy Donaldson joins us now from Glasgow at a protest inspired by the Netflix show Squid Game. Davy, I can't seem to put the two together. Explain to us what the link is here.
Yeah, I'm in here. I was at the Squid protest. This is organised by the Glasgow Action team directly across from the COP26 venue, so trying to get the message across here about Paris and about 1.5 degrees, and they're certainly doing it in a very good way. They have masks of world leaders. I'll just step out shot just for a second, just so you can get a better view, but you can see here that there's a number of people dressed as squid. You can see that they have masks on and they're trying to get that view across. Some of the world leaders, of course, include Putin, they include Joe Biden, they include Boris Johnson. So really the whole group of world leaders that are trying to make sure that they get this message across. Obviously, you can see as well that it's a peaceful protest. It's designed just to try and get a message across. They've been here for about maybe 20, 30 minutes doing this, playing dice, saying they're rolling the dice with the climate future, and they've been doing tug of war as well with various leaders on each side, and can kind of understand that, especially the likes of Putin, who's not come here, and the likes of the Chinese leader who's not come here on one side, and the ones who have attended on the other.
Well, Davy, thanks for bringing us that quite weird, harrowing scenes.
I suppose it's got us talking, though, hasn't it?
Interesting way, yeah. It's an interesting way to protest, given I think it is now Netflix's biggest, most watched series. So definitely a creative way there. But now, moving on, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, has apologised for likening the threat posed by climate change to the Holocaust, while saying the current generations of politicians will be cursed if they fail to secure a deal at COP. Here he is talking to the BBC.
We'll speak of them in far stronger terms than we speak today of the politicians of the 30s, of the politicians who ignored what was happening in Nazi Germany, because this will kill people all around the world for generations. It will allow a genocide on an infinitely greater scale.
Yes, I think as a rule, never bring up the Nazis, really. That's kind of...
It never ends well.
Yes, there we go. Well, anyway, now let's talk to Gideon Falter, the chairman of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. Thank you very much for joining us. What do you make of what was said there?
I mean, he was absolutely right to apologise unreservedly for those comments. I mean, as you said, it never works well to compare anything to the Holocaust. It was a very unique event and very dark event in human history, in which people deliberately set out the Nazi German state deliberately set out to systematically slaughter 6 million men, women, and Jewish men, women, and children. And to make comparisons like that in relation to the climate change summit is really not a clever idea. He was right to apologise for it unreservedly. And I think, as you said, it never works well as a comparison. We've seen people doing this over Donald Trump. We've seen people doing it over the SNP. We've seen people doing this over football games recently, and it just cheapens the memory of the Holocaust and doesn't make anybody's point any stronger.
You hit on a point there about it cheapening the memory of the Holocaust, and is that it? I mean, a lot of people, wrongly in my opinion, well, I think just wrongly really, have been wheeling out as well with things like the vaccine passports and how it's discrimination. Isn't that like... I'm sure you've heard all this stuff, right? And so... Is there, as time passes now, a bit of a cheapening of the memories of the realities of what happened there, do you think?
Unfortunately, what happens in general when you move further and further away from a historic event is that memories fade, people forget that these were real people, real families wiped out just because they were Jewish, and not just because they were Jewish as well. There were many people, for example, gay people were slaughtered systematically as well. It does start to cheapen the memory of the Holocaust, and people start to compare everything to Nazi Germany or to the Holocaust or to Adolf Hitler. And these were very unique events in a very dark period of human history. And if you get, feelings are running high over anything at all, whether it's climate change or some other issue, you don't strengthen your cause by making a comparison which is completely inept and incorrect to the Holocaust and that period of human history.
We've had a lot of people on this programme, guests who are very much of the view that what we are facing is existential, that we are facing basically humanity potentially being wiped out within, they might say, a matter of generations if we don't act. And Justin Welby said this would allow a genocide on an infinitely greater scale if politicians failed to act. And some people might say, actually, he was right to make that comparison because, it would essentially lead to the mass extinction of humanity if we do nothing. What do you make of that view?
Well, there's a very big difference between apathy and inaction causing loss of life versus very deliberate, systematic, planned pushing people into gas chambers and massacring them as fast as you can. That's a very different scenario. And of course, if Justin Welby feels that there is an existential threat to mankind, that's very serious. And he should say that it's very serious because he feels that there is an existential threat to mankind, not because he feels that there is some kind of comparison to be made with the Holocaust, which was a very different event.
Well, I do have to say, it's hard to play devil's advocate with you on this because it is hard to find a way in which his comments could be justified from any perspective. But thank you for joining us on that issue, Gideon Falter, the chairman of the Campaign Against Anti-Semitism. Very... it's just, I don't know what was going through his mind at the time, and he was obviously right to apologise. In a way, I get what he was trying to say, but again, I mean, as Gideon said there, it's one thing not acting on a policy decision, and it's another the deliberate extermination of an ethnic group. So very, very bizarre and divisive comment to make.
Yes, indeed. And in fact, that's echoed by Chris's view, or indeed Louise's, actually. Says it speaks volumes that someone that holds such a prominent position would say such a thing. It's not clever. And no, I think we can agree that it certainly.
Yeah, I also found that the use of... He also said that politicians would be cursed. Politicians will be cursed if they don't get this right. And I just think, given he is the Archbishop of Canterbury and obviously he holds a very senior, religious position, it seems a bit sinister, him saying if you don't do this, policy action, you're going to be cursed. It's that use of the word curse that feels very sinister coming from somebody of his position.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll keep all those views coming through to gbviews@gbnews.uk. We'll be back with more on today's top stories and plenty of your views after the break, so don't go anywhere.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else. I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called to the point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News, for To The Point. Good morning, you're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Patrick Christie's, and Mercy Moroki. We're here all the way through until midday with a show stacked full of today's biggest stories, top discussion topics and all of those big issues.
Yes, make sure you get in touch with us with your views, as usual, GB Views at gbnews.uk, and we'll be reading those out throughout the show. But first, it's time for the latest news with Rosie.
Good morning, I'm Rosie Wright. This is your news at 11 o'clock. 105 countries, including Brazil, Canada and Russia, are going to sign a deal pledging to end and reverse deforestation by 2030. That's going to be the first major agreement at the COP26 climate summit. When combined, the full list of signatories will represent 85% of the world's forests. Boris Johnson described the pledge as a chance to end humanity's long history as nature's conqueror and instead become its custodian.
Let's channel funds towards securing the rights of indigenous peoples and local communities and shift trillions towards supporting sustainable jobs, so that protecting our forests is not only the right course of action to tackle climate change, but the right course for a more prosperous future for us all.
US President Joe Biden has pledged American support for preserving forests and other ecosystems. Well, in a speech that he made at the conference, he said the scheme can and should play an important role in meeting ambitious climate goals. He also said all that was really needed was a commitment to change.
I'm confident we can do this. All we need to do is summon the will to do what we know is right and we know is necessary and know is within our capacity. So, as simple as it sounds, I think it is this simple. Let's get to work. We can do this, and it'll have a generational impact. Thank you.
2 Metropolitan Police officers have pleaded guilty to misconduct in public office after they shared images of the bodies of 2 murdered women. PC Dennis Jaffa and PC Jamie Lewis took photos of the murdered sisters Bieber Henry and Nicole Smallman on WhatsApp while they were protecting a police cordon. The Environment Secretary George Eustice says that a British scallop trawler has now been released after being held by French authorities. Well, it comes after France backed down in a dispute over French vessels fishing in British waters. The French president warned they could block British boats from its ports from today if they fail to issue more licences to French fishermen. Speaking to GB News, the Environment Secretary said any action by France would have been a breach of the Brexit agreement.
Those threats to deliberately create border disruption and prevent UK vessels going into French ports would have been a breach of the agreement we've got with the European Union, and probably would have breached elements of EU law as well. They only have to demonstrate that they've got a track record of working, at least one day a year over a 4-year period of accessing our waters. The vast majority have been able to demonstrate that with the records that they have.
Insulate Britain has begun staging demonstrations outside of the southeast of England for the first time today. Around 60 protesters have disrupted traffic in Manchester, Birmingham and London this morning. It is the 8th consecutive week they've held demonstrations. Well, 9 protesters from the group have been told they face committal proceedings over the breaking of injunctions granted to national highways. Some MPs are calling for the rollout of smart motorways to be suspended because of safety concerns. Well, the scheme uses the hard shoulder as a permanent traffic lane. It's been criticised by the Commons Transport Select Committee. Concerns were raised after multiple incidents involving fatalities where broken-down vehicles were hit by other drivers from behind. Yesterday, demonstrators protested against smart motorways by marching to the Houses of Parliament. The Australian Prime Minister has defended his handling of the scrapped submarine deal with France after the French president accused him of lying. Last month, Australia cancelled a $68 billion agreement with France, instead joining an alliance with the United States and Britain. Well, that was in exchange for security intelligence and nuclear-powered submarines. Speaking at COP26, Scott Morrison, the Australian Prime Minister, said he could deal with criticism of himself, but would not accept it of his country.
I'm not going to cop sledging of Australia. I'm not going to cop that on behalf of other Australians. I can deal with whatever people throw at me, but Australia has a proud record when it comes to our defence capability. That's why we'll be building these and we'll be building others, and Australia's service record, I think, needs no elaboration.
You're up to date here on GB News. I'll be back with the latest headlines in half an hour. For now, though, let's return to the point.
Good morning. You're watching To The Point on GB News with me, Mercy Moroki, and Patrick Christie's. We're here for another hour until midday with all of today's big stories and lots of discussion on the issues you care about. So here's what's on the menu for the last hour.
We'll be joining Tom Harwood live from the COP26 Climate Conference in Glasgow. Tom will talk us through yesterday's events from the meeting of world leaders and what has happened so far today.
Yes, and Nadeem Zahawi is considering longer days for students in England in an effort to help children to catch up on lost learning and prosper after the pandemic. We'll be joined by Francis Gilbert, who's a teacher and author of a book on getting the best out of state schools.
And in our daily feature, The Controversy, we will be looking at children with severe epilepsy reportedly being denied access to medical cannabis 3 years after the law changed to make it legal. We'll pose the question, should medical cannabis be more freely available?
Yes, we have all of that coming up and much more across the programme. And you can get in touch with us as usual on our email, gbviews@gbnews.uk. And in a moment, Patrick gives his views on smart motorways. But first, let's cross live to Westminster, where the Health Secretary Sajid Javid is facing questions from MPs about the NHS and the backlog.
How many additional doctors and nurses you're going to need, because it's impossible to know the sums of money that you're going to need without knowing the extra capacity needed. So we just wondered, what is your calculation as to the number of extra doctors and nurses that you believe the system is going to need in order to deal with that backlog?
I couldn't give you an exact number right now in terms of what we're going to need, because up until very recently, the SR, as you know, was only last week. The first step was in trying to reach an agreement internally in government what the funding would be. Of course, we would have to have made assumptions around workforce need, capital need, and other needs. But once we've got the sort of final settlement, we wanted to make sure then that we just looked at this again properly in detail, then published our plans, and we will set out what those are in terms of
just to be clear,
numbers.
Because I think the concern that a lot of people have is that there is absolutely no detail in terms of the number of extra doctors and nurses that you think are going to be necessary. So you do have those assumptions, and you will be publishing before the end of November the number of extra doctors and nurses that you think are going to be necessary to tackle the backlog.
Well, what I will say is this: is that we will be publishing a elective delivery plan for around electives specifically. Now, of course, what we're doing, the work that we do, the department does, the NHS does, is broader than that. But specifically on the delivery plan, we will go into some detail about the workforce.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but it's a very specific. I understand there's going to be a delivery plan, and you're going to be planning how many more operations are going to be done every year. And I understand as well, you can't tell us if you're going to deal with the backlog because we don't know by how much the waiting list is going to swell in the months ahead. But we're looking at something very much more specific, which is a workforce plan. How many more doctors, how many more nurses? Let me give you some numbers. You'll be very familiar with these numbers, but so the Royal Colleges say that we're going to need 500 more obstetricians, 1,400 more anaesthetists, 1,900 more radiologists, 2,000 more midwives, 2,000 to 2,500 more A&E consultants, 2,500 more GPs, and 39,000 nurses. And in fact, there are 93,000 vacancies across the NHS in total. So there are very specific numbers in each specialty that the Royal Colleges are talking about, the Health Foundation are talking about. You must have those numbers. Do you have those numbers privately? We know you haven't published them yet, but do you have your own internal estimates of what we're short?
Yes, of course. We have internal estimates. And now that we know what for the department and therefore for the NHS, what our final financial settlement is, we will be working on fine-tuning that plan. But you will also know, Mr. Chair, you may well be aware that as well as sort of identifying immediate need, and colleagues will know that there was a shortage of clinicians, a shortage within the NHS even before the pandemic had begun, and you've just rightly referred to approximately around 93,000 vacancies at the moment, which includes, for example, almost 10,000 vacancies for doctors in the NHS. So a lot of this challenge existed even before the pandemic. It has become more acute because of the needs, but we do need, I think, we need better long-term planning of workforce needs.
Sorry to interrupt. I will come on to the long term, but I just want to deal with the short term first. So by the end of November, there's an immediate short-term need, and there are immediate short-term things you could do. For example, increasing retention, bringing back retired clinicians, changes to immigration procedures to make it smoother and easier for people coming from countries where we trust their medical training. By the end of November, we will have a workforce plan that says these are the gaps, specialty by specialty. These are the extra people we're seeking to recruit, specialty by specialty. And these are the things we're going to do in the short term, because the money from the levy starts in April. So we've got to get cracking pretty quickly to fill those workforce gaps. That workforce plan is what we're going to see by the end of November.
Let me be a bit more clear. What I referred to by the end of November earlier is a delivery plan specifically around electives. And of course, that has a workforce need that comes with it. So when it comes to electives, in our delivery plan, we will set out how we would hope to meet both short-term and long-term needs in terms of workforce. But of course, there's a broader workforce need, beyond electives. So, for example, in primary care, in community hospitals, and elsewhere, and also social care. They're also thinking about the long-term need there, and the sort of interaction between the sort of need between healthcare and social care in terms of workforce. That work in terms of what planning better for that is a separate piece of work. That is
When's
already
that going to be complete?
That is work that's been commenced already by HEE. That I'd asked them to, I think it was in July, that I asked them to start a piece of work that is we call it a 15-year plan to set up a strategic framework for long-term workforce need. It's a big approach. So in terms of timing for that, you asked me when it's spring next year is roughly the timing we set for that. And the reason is because HEE are consulting broadly and widely. It's a big.
Well, that was the Health and Social Care Secretary, Sajid Javid, live at the moment, taking questions from the Health and Social Care Select Committee. There from the chair of that committee, previous former Health Secretary Jeremy Hunt as well. So if anything interesting comes out of that, of course, we'll bring you up to speed on that. But for now, Patrick is going to give you his views on smart motorways.
We need to scrap smart motorways. They're playing roulette with drivers' lives. There simply isn't enough data on how safe they are, and it's not good enough to retrospectively fit safety features after people have died. That's somebody's mum, dad, son, daughter. They won't take any comfort from the notion that if their relatives have been driving on the smart motorway a year later, they could have survived by pulling into a lay-by. Smart motorways currently account for around 400 miles of English highways. So that's 400 miles of English highway with no hard shoulder, essentially. Reports on the number of deaths on smart motorways are a little bit mixed, but The Guardian reported that there was 1 death for every 17 miles in 2019. The Mail reports there have been 53 deaths between 2015 and 2019. What we do know is that 1 in 10 cameras designed to monitor traffic flow simply aren't working. In fact, sometimes they get foggy and have to be pointed up at the sun to demist. So good luck to anyone who breaks down near a foggy camera. An undercover investigation found that camera operators, from the safety of their office, were saying that drivers should just start praying. Well, that's not really what I want, is it? The idea that I have to beg my higher power for safety on a motorway, I already ask enough of him every single day as it is. Just thinking about this logically, how on earth can it be rational that smart motorways are safer, let alone when the technology they need to function simply doesn't work? Just the actual idea of a smart motorway itself, the hard shoulder was a place of relative safety. You could pull in there if you took ill or if your car broke down. But now, if you blow a tyre, you're just asked to sit there in traffic, aren't you? And all too often, there's construction work and barriers going on along the side of the road. So even if you wanted to take your chances by veering into the grass verge, you probably have to play 10-pin bowling with a load of motorway maintenance barriers before you hit the trees. And then there's the other madness of the whole thing, isn't there? How many times have you been on a smart motorway with no traffic in sight? You could fire a volley of cannons on the M6 and not hit a thing, and you're still restricted to 50 miles an hour. I think they're just glorified speed traps, essentially, designed to raise money for the powers that be. And how long does it take to actually construct these things? If you used this example before, and I've used it again, how often are you on a smart motorway and there's a sign at the side of the road saying, please drive slowly, my daddy works here, and a picture of a man in a hard hat? Oh, very sorry, sunshine, your daddy does not work here. He is supposed to be, but he hasn't been seen here for years. And I've had a chance to have a look at him as well, because this stretch of road has basically just been a car park for as long as I can remember. I think smart motorways are just very expensive death traps, the brainchild of people without a brain, that poses more of a threat to public safety than simply just not doing it. Oh, hello. Well, we're over there now. Yes, no, I just don't see the logic behind how these things can possibly be considered safe.
Yeah, they're incredibly controversial, almost. Probably more controversial than e-scooters. That's the analogy I was going to make. But I was actually, over the weekend, when I was driving, there was roadworks and the hard shoulder had been closed off. They're probably making it into a smart motorway. That's probably why there were roadworks. But somebody had stopped, had their indicators on, their warning lights, hazard warning lights on, clearly broken down. And all I could see was sort of cars, sort of indicating to the right. Didn't think much of it until I realised I was pretty much, heading straight towards a stationary vehicle. And it's a similar thing that happens and has happened multiple times on smart motorways. People break down, and then it's sort of left to each individual driver to be particularly careful to make sure they're not going to drive straight into the back of you. It's a very bizarre system, I find, and I think smart motorways would only work if the technology in place that's supposed to stop the accidents happening worked. But as you say, even the traffic cameras to monitor it, some of them don't even work.
No, and that's the thing. If the technology isn't there for it, then the logistics all crumble, don't they? And then it just become very unsafe. I've asked all my family and friends never to use what should be the hard shoulder. That's from Yvonne. Thank you very much. As a regular motorway user, I consider these roads are absolute death traps. In the interim, before hopefully they are actually abolished, a blanket speed limit of 40 should be imposed, and that's from Derek.
Just across all motorways?
Well, I think it's the smart ones, I think he's saying. But yeah, no, it's... look, I think it just doesn't seem to work for me. I mean, they tend to be slower as far as I can see. If you know that the cameras aren't there and you know the logistics aren't there, then actually, the only way that they are supposed to be not less safe is if those cameras are pointed at what used to be the hard shoulder, which is now where I've stopped in traffic waiting for a lorry to drive through the back of me.
Yes, well, keep your views coming in, GB Views at gbnews.uk. But first, let's give you a quick COP roundup. The Queen addressed the delegates of COP26 yesterday, urging them to rise above the politics of the moment and act for our children to create a safer, stabler future. She also added that she took great pride in how her dear late husband, Prince Philip, promoted environmental issues. And she said she was proud of her son, Prince Charles, and her grandson, Prince William, for continuing to do so themselves. And the message was pre-recorded at Windsor Castle last week as the 95-year-old monarch continues to rest on doctors' advice. Here's what she had to say.
As the impact of the environment on human progress was a subject close to the heart of my dear late husband, Prince Philip, the Duke of Edinburgh, I, for one, hope that this conference will be one of those rare occasions where everyone will have the chance to rise above the politics of the moment and achieve true statesmanship.
Yes, well, meanwhile, Prince Charles told world leaders they must partner with businesses in a vast military-style campaign if they stand any hope of achieving climate change. He likened the challenge they face to preparing for a war.
The COVID-19 pandemic has shown us just how devastating a global cross-border threat can be. Climate change and biodiversity loss are no different. In fact, they pose an even greater existential threat, to the extent that we have to put ourselves on what might be called a warlike footing.
And environmentalist David Attenborough is also at COP26, and he told delegates that the time for action is now.
In my lifetime, I've witnessed a terrible decline. In yours, you could and should witness a wonderful recovery. That desperate hope, ladies and gentlemen, delegates, excellency, is why the world is looking to you and why you are here.
Yes, David Attenborough.
Such a powerful voice, isn't it?
Yeah.
I love that they put the background music as well to just almost make it more dramatic. But I was saying earlier, David Attenborough is probably the one person I take as my authority in terms of all this climate change, well, especially out of all the people who are at COP26 anyway, because he is one of the nation's sweethearts, isn't he? And he's so loved and trusted on all these issues, and he's raised awareness of the environment and nature more than any sort of person, I think, at all on TV in Britain.
Yeah,
so I do very much respect him.
Well, talking of a national treasure, the nation's sweetheart, GB News' political correspondent Tom Harwood is in Glasgow for us now. There he is. Tom, I'm loving your backdrop, I must say. So what's the latest then?
I always love your intros, Patrick. Yes, no, this is a grand backdrop. This is what's called the action zone of the blue half of COP26. There's a whole extra area called the green zone where where there's sort of more events and more public-focused things. The blue zone is where the action happens in terms of politics. And here is one end of the complex. The complex is sprawling and goes on for a long, long time, all the way down to the end where all those UN negotiators are scurrying away, making their negotiations, trying to make them work. Well, what's happening today? It's the second day of what's called the Leaders Summit within COP26. That's the 2 days at the start of the conference when all these world leaders and important business figures as well gather to have those high-level discussions before leaving it to their underlings to thrash out the details. Well, there have been several events that have been going on this morning. Boris hosted a breakfast with some of the leaders of the devolved parts of the United Kingdom, and also there's currently an event on forests going on. Of course, last night we heard this new grand agreement between most countries in the world to end deforestation within this decade, and that includes countries like China, like Russia and like Brazil, so it's a pretty significant step forward. Well, there's an event on deforestation being held as we speak, and not only are world leaders speaking at it, but also people like Jeff Bezos, the founder of Amazon. I'm sure that there's a joke in there somewhere about saving the Amazon with Jeff Bezos, but he's attracted a little bit of criticism already for saying that actually he realised how precious this Earth was as he jetted off into space. Now, some people might ask what the utility of him going on a happy trip up to space and the amount of carbon that might have emitted, and the hypocrisy that might be potentially within that opening statement of his, but that will be going on until the early afternoon. There are some other events on today. Joe Biden is hosting a round table on finance, on climate finance, hoping to get rich countries to be able to support the poorer countries through this green transition. And then at the end of today, around 5 o'clock, we're expecting a press conference from Boris Johnson before he jets back down to London this evening. Of course, Boris is in Westminster tomorrow to take Prime Minister's questions. There's been a lot of criticism over the Prime Minister for choosing to fly back down to London this evening when he could have taken, I suppose, a sleeper train or something else that might be a little bit more climate friendly. Downing Street, of course, defending the decision to fly, saying it's convenient and that the Prime Minister needs to be quickly moving around the place. It's an important job and he needs to be in multiple places in short order. But that's a little bit of a flavour of what's going on today. Of course, after today, it's the nitty-gritty of the negotiations, hopefully reaching some sort of grand international agreement by the end of next week.
OK, Tom, just stay with us for a quick second, because I've been asked quite a few times, those what look like flowers behind you, are they real or plastic?
Do you know what? I'm not actually sure. They do look a little bit plastic. If you will bear with me, Patrick, if you will bear with me, I can unplug myself and go and feel...
Yes,
I can go and
feel a flower.
The COP26 for you, and I'll run right back and tell you exactly
You cop a feel of a flower, Tom, while we fill. And it's very interesting, very fascinating. There we go.
You can still hear me, but I can't hear you. So I'm running over here to have a look at these... oh, gosh, it's really hard to know. I think they might be... They might be real. I think they are real. Yes, they are real. There's soil in there. There's soil in there, and these are sort of rubbery, actual, real plants. There you go. Not plastic. Who would have thought it? I certainly wouldn't have thought it. I'll plug back in so that I can hear you.
Fantastic stuff, Tom. There you go. You love to see it. Tom Harwood,
there we
roving
go.
reporter.
Good stuff.
Roving reporter at COP26. What a hero. Yes. Well, anyway, what we're going to do now is throw me a bit. Should we do some views? Should we do some views? Yeah, why not? GB Views at gbnews.uk. Lots about smart motorways. They've been pushed through by governments as a supposed answer to congestion. They create congestion, etc. Look, certainly, I can only go from personal experience. Every single time, not every single time, most times I've been on a smart motorway, I've encountered more traffic and more stop and start than the other way around, that's for sure. And Chris has been in touch about our comments about David Attenborough. David Attenborough's a bit like the NHS, you know. Not allowed to criticise him.
True, but I mean, what are you criticising him for? That's the question.
Well,
I haven't found much to criticise the man on. That is my genuine feeling.
Yes, and of course the reason why I asked Tom to go and do that is that Kenneth asked, are those plants plastic behind Tom at COP26? Now we know, Kenneth. Tom went where no journalist has ever been before and actually touched a plant at COP26. Thinks they're real.
Yes.
Yeah, good stuff on all your views. Thank you very much. GB Views, gbnews.uk.
Yeah, but after the break, we'll be speaking to families of children with severe epilepsy who are protesting in Westminster today over a lack of accessibility to medical cannabis. This is despite it being legalised over 3 years ago, so stay with us for that.
Hello again. Plenty of bright blue skies today. Sunny spells for many, especially inland. There will be further showers, however, particularly near the coast. And it will feel cold in the wind and chilly overnight with a touch of frost in places. Low pressure is still close by. It's to the north of the UK and we're dragging in this colder northwesterly airflow, but the isobars less tightly packed compared to Monday, and so less blustery, less unsettled on the whole, and for many it's a fine bright day with plenty of sunshine. Showers inland, I think, particularly for the Midlands, southern and southeast England, perhaps northeast England as well. Showers fairly few and far between. They'll mostly be appearing into northern and western coastal areas, and in that blustery breeze it will feel on the cool side, 9 to 13 Celsius typically. Under clear skies then, temperatures fall away overnight, a touch of frost forming in places. But further showers will feed into northern and western coasts and some more prolonged rain at times for northeast Scotland, and then that's sinking south into Aberdeenshire on a brisk breeze. Frost-free in the north with that breeze, but otherwise temperatures dipping to 1 to 3 Celsius typically inland, perhaps -1 in some sheltered spots. So a chilly start to Wednesday, frost first thing, a few fog patches for the Midlands, southern and southeast England. Soon enough though, this area of cloud and some fairly prolonged showers pushes through parts of eastern England, reaching East Anglia by the afternoon. That brisk breeze in the North Sea will feel cold, and it will be breezy in the west with further showers here. But inland, central slice of the UK seeing a lot more dry and bright weather with some sunshine. The showers continue to topple south across East Anglia into southeast England on Wednesday evening. Eventually, most of the showers die away. Still some for West Wales, Devon, Cornwall, northern Scotland, but another frosty night in store and a chilly start once again on Thursday. Cloudier skies appear on Friday, turning unsettled in the northwest.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for the political correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is the political correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30 a.m. till 12 p.m. every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
I'm Mark Dolan. Join me live from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday. Your weekend starts here. My show exists to do three things: to inform, to debate and to entertain. Big guests, big stories and big opinions. And I can't do any of it without you. It's lively and it's a little bit funny. So join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday on GB News.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
Good morning, I'm Rosie Wright. Here are the latest headlines at 11:30. 105 countries are going to sign a deal pledging to end and reverse deforestation by 2030. It's the first major agreement at the COP26 climate summit. The countries involved represent 85% of the world's forests. Boris Johnson described the pledge as a chance to end humanity's long history as nature's conqueror and instead become its custodian. Two Metropolitan Police officers have pleaded guilty to misconduct in public office after they shared images of the bodies of two murdered women. PC Dennis Jaffa and PC Jamie Lewis took photos of the murdered sisters Bieber Henry and Nicole Smallman on WhatsApp while they were protecting a police cordon. Insulate Britain has begun staging demonstrations outside of the southeast of England for the first time today. Around 60 protesters disrupted traffic in London, Birmingham and Manchester this morning. Meanwhile, 9 Insulate Britain demonstrators have now been told they face committal proceedings over the breaking of injunctions granted to national highways. The Australian Prime Minister has defended his handling of the scrapped submarine deal with France after the French president accused him of lying. Last month, Australia cancelled a $68 billion agreement with France, instead choosing to join an alliance with the United States and Britain. Well, speaking at COP26, the Australian Prime Minister said he could deal with criticism of himself, but would not accept it of his country. Some MPs are calling for the rollout of smart motorways to be suspended due to safety concerns. The scheme, which uses the hard shoulder as a permanent traffic lane, has been criticised after multiple incidents where broken-down vehicles were hit by other drivers. Yesterday, demonstrators protested against smart motorways by marching to the Houses of Parliament. A new study has found that phone and video consultations with doctors are worse but more convenient than face-to-face appointments. Researchers at the University of Cambridge found that medics and patients feel it's harder to build a trusting relationship. But it is easier as both sides have reduced waiting times, no travelling, and of course safety from infection. You're up to date here on GB News. I'll be back with all on today's top stories at 12 o'clock. But now back to Patrick and Mercy.
Good morning again. Now, families of children with severe epilepsy are campaigning all throughout Westminster today, calling for greater access to medicinal cannabis. Specialist doctors have been allowed to prescribe medical cannabis to patients since 2018 after several high-profile cases, including that of young epilepsy sufferer Alfie Dingley.
Well, however, campaigners have claimed there have only been 3 prescriptions that have been issued for the type of medical cannabis used by Alfie. End Our Pain campaign group says patients are facing an almost total block on access to NHS prescriptions, and families are being forced to go private, in some cases spending up to £2,000 a month.
Yes, well, let's talk to campaigner Emma Appleby, whose 12-year-old daughter Tegan has a rare form of epilepsy and has struggled to access medical cannabis. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Just tell us about your campaign and what you're calling on the government to change today.
So basically, for the last 3 years, we have been campaigning for access to medical cannabis on the NHS. I'm paying privately £2,000 per month to keep my daughter on this medication. So we are pleading with Sajid Javid today to help and get our children prescriptions on the NHS.
We mentioned there it's been legal for doctors to do this for a number of years now. I mean, why is it in your view that doctors aren't given the access to medical cannabis for people who need it?
Yeah, definitely. It has been legal for 3 years. 3 years now, exactly 3 years, and we're still fighting. Everybody blames everybody else, so we need Sajid Javid to step up now and help us. Either fund our private prescriptions or allow us to get NHS prescriptions.
Do you think there's a big stigma still around the idea of having cannabis for medical purposes? People associate it just with illegal drugs, don't they?
Yeah, I think so. I think you're definitely right there, the stigma of the word cannabis. If you didn't call it cannabis oil and you called it its medical name, they've all got brand names and you wouldn't know the difference. So I do think a lot of it is stigma.
And obviously, Sajid Javid is relatively new in the role, and of course he was Home Secretary at the time that it was announced that doctors would be allowed to do this. So he's obviously a key figure in your campaign to influence. Has he engaged? Has he been? Have you found him to be engaging in this issue to the extent that you'd like him to be?
Not quite yet, because obviously COVID's been quite popular, so that's been a big thing. But we're hoping that our event today will really get his attention and he'll step in and help us. At the end of the day, it was him that allowed the first prescription to be done for Alfie Dingley back in 2018. So we couldn't ask for anyone better to help us.
And what's the event today? Just talk me through it. What's it like? How many people are involved? What's the end goal? We know what the end game is, obviously, but how many people are involved?
There's about 20 families that are here. We're all here together just to plead. The MPs are meeting, some of us in Parliament, to show their support, and then there's a group of us that are going into number 10 Downing Street to hand a petition in to the Prime Minister to ask if he can help, and ask Sajid Javid again to step up and just do what he can to help us.
Finally, for those who don't quite understand how important this is, just finish by telling us, what does this mean for you and your daughter? What would having access to this do for her?
So we ran out of money and we couldn't fundraise anymore in the first lockdown, and Tegan actually went without the oil and ended up back in intensive care fighting for her life. So this medication isn't just something that helps her, it keeps her alive. It is life-saving medication for her, and that is why it's so important that we get a prescription on the NHS, because I can't keep finding £2,000 every month. I've been doing it 3 years. It needs to stop.
Well, Emma, thank you so much for bringing us your story, and all the best in your campaign to get Sajid Javid, the Health and Social Care Secretary, to make sure doctors are giving access to this medical cannabis to people who need it. Emma Appleby there, her 12-year-old daughter Tegan has a rare form of epilepsy and has struggled to get access to this medicinal cannabis.
Yes, indeed. Well, it's a very controversial issue, and I'm not sure it needs to be as controversial as a lot of people make out. I suspect if we had a referendum on it, maybe it would become legal, but I'm not sure. But yeah, it should be legal. This, according to Philip. Take the mystique and money out of the illegal trade. I mean, it's relatively easy to say as well, isn't it, that things like alcohol, and if we're starting again today with a clean slate, things like alcohol and tobacco would possibly be illegal. Yeah,
and I think it is important to separate the sort of what we see as illegal marijuana and this cannabis oil. I can't remember quite all the scientific aspects behind it, but it is distinctly different. It takes out sort of what some see as the harmful aspects of cannabis. And so I think the people campaigning for this would be very keen to make that distinction between sort of marijuana for recreational use and marijuana, cannabis for medicinal use.
Absolutely. Well, keep those views coming in. gbviews@gbnews.uk. We do indeed love to hear from you. And the vast majority of you, so far anyway, seem to be quite pro legalising cannabis for medical use. I use a cannabis-based product for pain relief, and it's ridiculous that it's not legal, and that's from Ricky, so there we are.
Yes, well, keep your views coming in. But for now, it's day 2 of Crunch Talks at the COP26 Global Climate Conference in Glasgow, and ahead of the gathering of around 120 leaders, the government outlined a pathway to try to make transport net zero by 2050. And in Buckinghamshire, one of the UK's first trials to test wireless electric car charging technology is underway, and our East of England reporter Amelia Harper has this report.
Transport is currently the biggest single source of climate warming emissions. To try to reach net zero by 2050, the government is ending the sale of new petrol and diesel cars and vans from 2030. New investment also includes £620 million for electric vehicle grants and infrastructure such as on-street charging. Currently, charging involves using long cables, but in Buckinghamshire, a new government-funded trial is testing wireless electric vehicle charging. Instead of plugging into a standard charging pillar, the car charges while parked over an induction charging pad in the ground.
Just tell me actually how this physically charges, because if you've not got a plug going into the car, how does this technology work?
You might be familiar with wireless charging of your mobile phone, where you'll have a desk on your pad, a pad on your desk, and you place the phone on top of that pad. And what happens is that there's a coil on your desk, there's a coil on your phone, and there's a current flowing in the one coil which induces a current in the second coil which then charges the battery. So it's the same technology and the same principle as is used every day now for wireless charging of mobile phones. The driver will drive into the bay. We have aids and guides to help them align up with where the charge car needs to be in relation to the charge point on the ground. Once they have come to a stop, they simply exit the vehicle, and 10 minutes later, the charging system kicks into life and charges the car automatically without any intervention from the driver.
Britain's competition regulator, the Competition and Markets Authority, says by 2030, Britain needs at least 10 times as many charge points as the 25,000 that are there currently. It's hoped this technology will help the around 40% of people who don't have access to off-street parking, such as driveways or garages, to charge their vehicles.
This represents a real step forward in how EVs can be used, because up till now they were relatively expensive and could only be charged by cable. So now we have a position where that's not the case. They can be charged without cable. The cars themselves are becoming more affordable, and so more people can buy them. So it's really important that we investigate ways of charging these cars in a way the public can have easy and safe access to them.
It's hoped the trial will unlock new ways to charge EVs. And point the public towards new ways to fuel their journeys. Amelia Harper, GB News, Marlow.
I think that's really clever, actually. I think that would, if people had those sort of installed in their driveways or in the street, that would solve a lot of problems in terms of charging your cars, having to plug them in. Very clever. But coming up, the Education Secretary, Nadeem Zahawi, has said he's considering radical changes to the school day in order to boost attainment. So could pupils face longer hours at school? That's one of the proposals the government's considering. We'll be getting right into that after the break.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
I'm Colin Brazier. I've reported from more than 70 countries around the world, covered wars from Afghanistan to Iraq, from Lebanon to the Balkans. I'm trying to bring that experience, that feel for events, to the studio. And something else, I'm ready to give an opinion. Today's stories with a spark. Brazier from 8 p.m. weekdays on GB News.
Join us for Political Correction. We're here every Sunday to correct politics and put you, the people, back in charge.
We talk about all areas of the United Kingdom, including Northern Ireland.
Our debate goes way beyond the Westminster Village. It's about the real country. It's about your opinion. So please, we want you to tell us what you think.
This is Political Correction.
Every Sunday morning from 10 a.m. here on GB News.
Hi, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
And we're hosting a show right here on GB News, 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, called To The Point.
We're going to be talking about all the big issues that matter to you at home in Britain.
Absolutely, whether it's holding politicians to account, discussing what's taking place in the Channel, banging on about law and order, we're not afraid to do the absolute lot of it.
Yes, and if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we'll be saying it.
Make sure you're here 9:30am till 12pm, every single weekday, right here on GB News for To The Point. Yes, well, Education Secretary Nadeem Zahawi has confirmed he's looking at extending school days to help pupils make up lost teaching hours during the pandemic. He says he wants everyone to move towards the average school day of 6.5 hours. The chairman of the Education Select Committee, Robert Halfon, has said that according to the Department for Culture, Media, Sports, a longer school day increases numeracy by 29%. But Paul Whiteman, General Secretary of School Leaders Union, the NAHT, says children's happiness and well-being should be prioritised as well as their education.
Yes, well, we're now joined by Francis Gilbert, who's a former teacher, who also wrote the book on how to get the best out of state schools. Thank you so much for joining us. I have to say I'm quite sceptical about that statistic we just said there by Robert Halfon, that a longer school day can increase numeracy skills by 29%. Surely it all depends what you're actually doing with that extra time.
It does indeed. I mean, there's some evidence from the United States where there is a set of schools called Knowledge is Power schools, or sometimes known as KIPP schools, which do have a very extended school day, often running from 7 a.m. in the morning till 5 at night, or the equivalent number of hours. And they do achieve very high test scores in numeracy and literacy for their students, many of whom come from quite disadvantaged backgrounds. That said, if the systematic research of what happens to those children when they go to university or college seems to indicate they fall off, their achievement does fall off in the longer term. But so there is some evidence that it can make a difference. But of course, we need to weigh up the children's well-being as well. So if children are in academic classes until late at night, as it were, and late into the evening, that can affect their self-esteem to a certain degree. And there's some evidence for that. So it's checks and balances. I think we need to have a kind of a reasonable approach. My suggestion would be that I do think extended school day is a good idea, but I do think there should be a lot more creative type subjects offered later on, because children do get very tired. And we do need to, I think, offer more in schools. Things like physical education, drama, music, all are really important, and just as important as numeracy and literacy, in my view. So that would be my sort of take. That would be my advice to the new Education Secretary to support the creative arts, which have been cut.
It all means more teachers and more longer days for the teachers as well, doesn't it? I mean, realistically, they're going to accept that, do you think?
Well, I guess it depends on the funding, doesn't it? If you've got proper funding to pay for more teachers, then you can work a shift type system, can't you? Obviously, if the existing staff are required to just stay longer in school, then that's going to cause significant staff stress, and that may increase staff illness and have a counter effect. So I do think that the resources do need to be put in. Obviously, there's been the new £2 billion being put in to catch up lessons. So hopefully that will be spent on getting expert staff in to help children with, various things that they've missed during the pandemic, which aren't just literacy and numeracy. I do think like the creative arts, which have been massively cut back in schools over the last 10 years, need to be brought back. And there's some evidence that, learning a musical instrument, for example, really can help with your maths and your literacy for a lot of complicated reasons. But again, research does show that. So I do think that the government need to be creative and imaginative in the way in which they roll out this kind of extended schools program, which could be quite exciting, and it could be really helpful for a lot of children, a lot of parents too.
Yeah, and I was going to make that point, actually. I don't think there'd be many parents who would be opposed to their children being in school longer, not least because, often they have to get wraparound care anyway after they finish work. But how long are we talking? When we say an extended school day, are we just talking half an hour or an hour? Or what does an extended school day actually look like?
Well, I guess, the new Labour government did experiment with this, and some free schools have been experimenting with it. And it varies, doesn't it? Because you can have an earlier start to the school day. There's some evidence that teenagers don't really like that earlier school start. And so we've had some schools have got, a later start, and then they move, there's activities moving into the evening, as it were. Many secondary schools in the UK now do open quite late. They may have other services there, like gyms or swimming pools that are open to the public. So, you know, the extended school day is happening in some schools already, and the best ones do it in a creative and flexible way, you know, meeting the needs of the children, as it were. So young children probably need to be getting home relatively early, particularly with these dark nights coming in, whereas older children can stay longer and often benefit from, you know, having things that are creative and things like theatre and drama clubs, creative writing
All right,
clubs,
Francis,
music.
I'm sorry, we're going to end it there, I'm afraid. Sorry. We're just very pressed for time, I'm afraid. We've got to go to outside the Old Bailey for a development there. Francis Gilbert, they're a former teacher who wrote a book on essentially how to improve state schools, I suppose. Now, the mother of murdered sisters Bieber Henry and Nicole Smallman has called on the Met Commissioner to resign. Mina Smallman was reacting to the news that 2 police officers have pleaded guilty to taking selfies next to the bodies of her murdered daughters when they should have been guarding the scene. Well, Mark White joins us now, our Home Affairs Security Editor. Mark, what are the developments, please?
Well, Mina Smallman, the mother of the 2 murdered sisters, Bieber Henry and Nicole Smallman, saying that she believes it's time for the Met Commissioner to go. She was giving a statement outside the Old Bailey, reacting to the news that these 2 police officers had pleaded guilty to, instead of guarding the murder scene up in Friant Park in northwest London, had instead been right in at the scene, taking pictures of the dead bodies of these 2 sisters, sending pictures and selfies on the WhatsApp social media messaging site to members of the police service, but even civilians as well. They pleaded guilty to that. They'll be back here in December. Now, this follows the news from the Independent Office of Police Conduct last week that the Met Police had been criticised over their lacklustre response, below standard response to Mina Smallman and other family members who had called the police to report the 2 sisters missing in June of last year. They've been in Friant Park celebrating Bieber's birthday and also the partial lifting of lockdown when they were stabbed to death by Daniel Hussein, who was jailed for life last week. Well, of course, in light of that, the criticism over the lacklustre police response to them being reported missing, and of course today the horrific news that 2 police officers really were responsible for an appalling breach of trust here by, instead of guarding the scene, taking these selfies with the bodies of these women, these 2 sisters. She has said that the Commissioner should indeed consider her position. I spoke to her. She was out on the steps, and she said, first of all, in response to the way that the police had conducted themselves throughout, having been made to apologise, she said that the below standard response from the Met. She said it's shameful that the IOPC, the Independent Office for Police Conduct, had to tell the Met that they should apologise to us in their failings of the missing person. She said that was too little too late, that apology. And then on this issue, I asked her if the Met Commissioner should go. She said that when she was in a position of responsibility, Mina Smallman that is, she had to take the can. She said it's time now for those in responsibility, the Met Commissioner, to take the can.
Mark, thank you very much. Mark White there, our Home Affairs and Security Editor, reporting from outside the Old Bailey. Well, look, that's it from us here at To The Point for today, but don't go away because up next is the briefing with Gloria De Piera.
Hello, good morning. A cold start out there for many of us, but a bright start. Plenty of blue skies and sunny spells expected through the rest of the day. There will be further showers in places, low pressure still close by, but as this low slowly moves off the scene, we pull this colder feed from the northwest. That's also containing a number of showers, but mainly to the north and the west of the UK. That's where the showers have continued through the night. Further showers for northern Scotland, Northern Ireland, parts of Western England and West Wales well through the morning and into the afternoon. Elsewhere, some mist patches first thing, they'll lift, and then plenty of sunny spells. One or two showers will develop elsewhere, but mostly they'll be focused towards the north and the west. Wherever they are, though, they'll be fairly fleeting, pushed through on a gusty breeze, and it will feel a little on the chilly side, I think, this afternoon, with temperatures